people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fucking fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
All right, we'll start with this. Unbeaten up-and-comer Ramla Ali posted this image via her social media. It appears she's going to be returning to action July 9th, early next month, on the undercard of Derek Chisora versus Kubrat Pulev 2 against an opponent that has yet to be announced. At this time, I don't know on what kind of schedule they want to put Ramla Ali in there with a champion at 122 pounds where Ramla campaigns. But I'll say this much. I don't think it would be wise to put her in there with a champion.
I don't think it's necessary to rush her.
Ramla Ali is 32 years old, sporting a professional record of 5 wins, no losses, and no draws, and in that way I understand that she's not the youngest unbeaten up-and-comer.
Having already seen action earlier this year, in March.
You know, those champions at 122 pounds, every single one of them, from the top to the bottom, from the apex predator to the weakest link, every single one has a lot more professional experience than Ramla Ali. I think that's what she needs to amass for the time being. Whether you're talking about this division's apex predator, Mayerlin Rivas, reigning WBA champion,
Mexico's own Jamie Mercado, this division's WBC champion,
or the two newly crowned champions at this weight, France's own Sigaling Lefavre, reigning WBO champion, or Shernika Johnson, newly crowned reigning IBF champion. These are all more experienced fighters than Ramla Ali by a considerable margin. And even though Ramla's 32 years old,
I understand that she ain't got all the time in the world.
I understand that she's not the youngest unbeaten up-and-comer. I also understand that if you rush her into a fight with one of them, you're rushing her into what could be her first professional loss. Ramla exhibits a high ceiling, good skills, very good physical dimensions for a super bantamweight.
Yeah, she could probably one day move up to super featherweight.
Yeah, one day. But she needs more rounds in the bank. She needs more experience. Her last contest was scheduled for 8. Ramla Ali wrapped it up in 2, you understand. She stopped Shelly Barnett in just 2 rounds, and I happen to think that Ramla is going to need more rounds in the bank, more experience, before she takes on a Jamie Mercado, a Mayerlin Rivas, a Shernika Johnson, or a Sigaling Lefavre.
She hasn't fought in an 8-rounder yet.
The last fight was scheduled for 8, but she ended it in 2, and I happen to think she's going to need those rounds in the bank. She's going to need to fight in an 8-rounder under the hot lights, let alone a 10-rounder, before she challenges those champions, because they're used to that. She's not.
I don't know who it is she's going to be fighting at super bantamweight. Her opponent hasn't been announced yet.
And I don't know what kind of schedule they've got her on. How soon do they want Ramla Ali to fight for an alphabet title? But I happen to think they should hold that off till either the end of this year or the beginning of next year.
That's what they should do.
Ramla excites me. She is an exciting fighter who's really coming into her own, transitioning from an amateur style to a pro style. Fight by fight, I've seen the improvements. I've seen that she's coming along, and she's coming along nicely. But if you rush her into a title fight ahead of schedule,
I think the weakest link at 122 pounds might be Shernika Johnson.
Tenuously, I think that if you had to assign such a title to one of the 4 reigning champions at 122 pounds, it would be between either Shernika Johnson or Sigaling Lefavre. And that's not because they're flawed fighters or limited fighters.
It's relative. It's only because they're less experienced than Jamie and Mayerlin.
It's only because Shernika and Sigaling, they haven't been champions quite as long as Jamie and Mayerlin Rivas. That's really what it is. In reality, they're not weak champions or weak fighters at all, just somewhat weaker than their contemporaries. And every single one of them is a more experienced fighter than Ramla Ali. So that's not a situation you want to run headfirst into.
Ultimately, I don't know what they're going to do.
Ramla Ali, her team, and the people over there at Matchroom, I don't know how soon they want to fight for an alphabet title, a major title, in order for Ramla to become a champion. You know, I don't know how soon they want that to happen.
But if you want to know what I think, and you're here, so I'll assume that you do.
At just 5-0, given the fighters that Ramla has been fighting, no, I don't think she's ready for this particular crop of Champions. Not yet. I think in time she will be.
I'm not talking about a lot of time either.
Though for now, I do think she needs more rounds in the bank. More than she needs to be pursuing a world title at this time. We'll see who she ends up fighting early next month.
Next month on the 9th.
In men's light heavyweight news, ahead of this weekend's big unification clash between Artur Beterbiev and Joe Smith Jr., it appears that another big fight is underway. Gilberto Ramirez says he's in negotiations to face Dimitri Bivol.
Like that fight.
Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez says he's in negotiations for a fight against WBA light heavyweight champion Dimitri Bivol. The 30-year-old Mexican is now the #1 contender with the World Boxing Association after previous top spot holder Dominic Bocel. Should the fight happen, Ramirez would be chasing two-weight glory, having previously been the WBO super middleweight champion.
Zurdo stopped Dominic Bocel in his last fight earlier this year.
At this time, I don't know that I can take it from Zurdo Ramirez that those negotiations are underway. We're going to need confirmation from both sides. We're going to need confirmation from Team Bivol and Team Ramirez before we get our hopes up.
Both Ramirez and Bivol fight on the same platform.
But they don't fight for the same promotional outfit. Zurdo fights for Golden Boy. Bivol fights for Matchroom.
So who's going to do the show? Is it going to be a Matchroom show or a Golden Boy Promotions show?
That is a legitimate question in today's highly political boxing environment. Zurdo himself was quoted as saying, the negotiations are already in place. It's just a matter of him wanting to and signing the contract. That's the fight everyone wants to see. That's the fight we all want. I believe that in a week, everything will look good, he told Izquierdazo.com.
Zurdo Ramirez might have a top spot by way of the WBA.
And he may very well be in a pole position to become Dimitri Bivol's mandatory challenger. But as it stands, I know of no order from the WBA.
Did the WBA order that fight? Because if they did, I must have missed it.
Dimitri Bivol is hot property right now after his career best win over Canelo Alvarez. The 31-year-old welcomed a rematch against the superstar, but that ship has sailed for the time being. On September 17th, Alvarez will move back to super middleweight and defend his 4 world titles against Gennady Golovkin in their trilogy. Canelo's promoter, Eddie Hearn, had hoped to get his own light heavyweight star, Joshua Buatsi, the WBA #2 contender, a shot at Bivol later this year.
And in the absence of a direct order from the WBA,
An actual mandate to thereby satisfy a mandatory, in the absence of this, Dimitri Bivol is free to negotiate a fight with Joshua Buatsi, i.e., he's got options. In the absence of an actual order, he's got wiggle room to make another fight.
he can fight Joshua Buatsi if he wants, or he can fight Zurdo.
Zurdo Ramirez, who says, I'm the only Mexican in this universe who can beat Dimitri Bivol. I can knock him out.
You said universe?
I made that part up, but the rest is true. Gilberto Ramirez feels he's the only Mexican who stands a chance, the only Mexican fighter anywhere at or around these weights that stands a chance of knocking out Dimitri Bivol. And, he's got to say that.
So what do you expect him to say? That he expects to get outboxed by Dimitri?
Canelo Alvarez losing that fight created a very unique opportunity for Zurdo Ramirez, who's never really been a fan favorite. And this is a guy who's got a lot of fucking fights.
But his career still really hasn't taken off.
He actually gave Porky Medina his first professional loss many years ago. He actually fought Maxime Vlasov, the same Maxime Vlasov that Joe Smith Jr. languished with. Zurdo beat that guy years ago as well. He won a decision over that guy.
He beat Jesse Hart 2 times. He very recently beat Sullivan Barrera.
Inoue Gonzalez, and more recently, Dominic Bocel for a top spot by way of the WBA. I think he's got a professional record of 44 wins, no losses, no draws, and 30 knockouts.
44 wins.
Close to 50 fucking fights, having already been a world champion at super middleweight. But for some reason, Zurdo's career never quite took off. And this could be the launch pad for his career, the proverbial launch pad, potentially beating Dimitri Bivol if he can get him in the ring.
Well, he says negotiations are underway.
He says, after the fight Bivol and Canelo had, my fight with Bivol is a must, said Ramirez to ESPN Deportes. And when that fight happens, I assure you that I am the only Mexican who can defeat him. And not only that, I think that after what we saw in the Canelo fight, I can knock him out. We're going to ask for the fight. It's a mandatory, so we hope that he will comply, because here I am, and we are ready to take advantage of that championship opportunity at 175 pounds, which is what we have been asking for since we moved up a division.
And I can't stress this enough. We need confirmation from both sides before we get our hopes up.
Because I like this fight. I'm okay with Dimitri deciding to fight Joshua Buatsi, and I'm okay with Dimitri deciding to fight Zurdo Ramirez. Either fight works for me, though the Zurdo Ramirez fight would be a fight against a more experienced fighter than Joshua Buatsi, a former champion.
We need confirmation on both sides before we get our hopes up.
Because there's so much he said, she said going on in boxing these days, we do need confirmation from Dimitri Bivol, his handler, his promoter, Eddie Hearn, the people at Matchroom. We need to know that these conversations are actually happening as opposed to Zurdo just putting things out there.
I'll tell you, I think that Zurdo's more ready for this fight than Joshua Buatsi is.
It's nothing against Joshua Buatsi, but he is a comparatively greener, less experienced fighter than Zurdo. Need I remind you that Zurdo's no stranger to the light heavyweight division. He actually campaigned here years ago. That's where he beat Maxim Vlasov. Whereas here today, Joshua Buatsi has yet to fight someone as solid as a Maxim Vlasov. Zurdo's already been there and done that, and he's a former champion. So I do feel Zurdo is more ready for a Dimitri Bivol fight than Joshua Buatsi is.
Those are two very different fights that present two very different challenges for the reigning champion.
I'll be honest with you. The Joshua Buatsi fight seems like a more winnable fight to me because I don't trust his gas tank or his punch resistance. The aesthetic of the match would be different because Joshua Buatsi is a more economic fighter than Zurdo Ramirez. Joshua Buatsi doesn't put as many punches together consistently. He's not a prolific puncher. He fights in bursts, and he does a lot of punch picking.
Joshua Buatsi's a cross between a pure boxer and a boxer puncher, whereas Zurdo's a pressure guy.
Hey, what he is, he's a goddamn cruiserweight on a diet, is what he is. I'd wager that Zurdo Ramirez is a more durable fighter, takes a better punch than a Joshua Buatsi.
You know, I've never thought very much of Zurdo Ramirez as boxer.
I don't think he's nothing special, you understand, but what I do think is he's a very big guy, durable, and he throws a lot of punches. He's a southpaw.
I don't think he's as good a boxer as Dimitri. I don't think he's as good a boxer as Canelo Alvarez, but he's bigger than both.
And if there's one thing fight fans tend to forget, it's that size matters. Don't let anybody tell you different. Yes, a Canelo Alvarez, for example, is a more decorated fighter, more streamlined, more nuanced, in many ways a better boxer than a Zurdo Ramirez, but he's nowhere near as big as that guy. That guy's size presents different challenges to Dimitri that Canelo couldn't.
And Zurdo Ramirez does have the right base style for the job.
He's a pressure guy. If you want to get to a finesse fighting kind of fighter, you have to apply pressure. You have to throw punches and bunches and walk him down while you do it. Dimitri would likely spend a lot more time on his back foot with Zurdo.
Oh yeah, he'd spend more time on his back foot with Zurdo than he did with Canelo.
A lot of people don't want to hear that because they don't want to account for Canelo Alvarez's lack of size in that
They
fight.
tell themselves, in their mind, size had nothing to do with
It was
it.
just skill and not the durability and size of a natural light heavyweight like Dimitri Bivol that made that fight look the way that it looked. But I'll tell you something right here and right now. Size is a factor. It was a factor in Canelo versus Bivol, and it would be a factor in Zurdo Ramirez versus Bivol.
And I've never been high on Zurdo Ramirez's boxing.
But in a Dimitri Bivol fight, he does have the right set of ingredients, tools to make things interesting. So I wouldn't mind seeing that fight if it is in fact in negotiations, if it is in fact underway. We'll see if it actually is. And finally, in men's super bantamweight and bantamweight news, an article was published in Japan in reference to some concerns that reigning unified super bantamweight champion Stephen Fulton of America raised.
He said something about Naoya Inoue's wraps or his gloves.
Something about Stephen saying don't get involved with Inoue wearing Reyes gloves. And Naoya Inoue himself, he didn't take too kindly to these comments, and he stated, the result is the same, no matter which glove you wear.
What, people are crying foul play?
Weren't the crybabies in America always crying foul play? Always cooking up a conspiracy theory?
Yeah.
Didn't that whole Glovegate fiasco originate here in the United States? A bunch of YouTube authors and guys looking to make a profit?
Deontay Wilder himself cried foul play, though he never proved that there was anything in Tyson Fury's gloves.
And it didn't help his story that both the second Tyson Fury fight and the third, both of them were held under the auspices of the Nevada State Athletic Commission. I mean, if you think that this guy cheated or he got away with cheating, Why would you hold the third fight at the scene of the crime? Why would you hold the third fight in Las Vegas, Nevada when you feel
He either got away with cheating in Las Vegas or the Nevada State Athletic Commission helped him cheat.
that story didn't make a lot of sense?
It didn't.
Neither does this one.
It doesn't.
The Japanese Boxing Commission don't fuck around, you understand? For a perspective, after Luis Neri tested positive for a banned substance and blew the weight in both the Yamanaka fights, the first one and the second, he was banned for life. Banned from boxing in Japan on Japanese soil for the rest of his life, the rest of his boxing career. They don't mess around over there. For a perspective, Japanese national 4-division champion Kazuto Ioka got himself in some hot water over tattoos he sported in plain sight.
Got in some hot water with the Japanese Boxing Commission over there over tattoos.
Don't confuse how the Japanese run their boxing scene to how the Americans run their boxing scene. It's the wild, wild west over here.
American boxing commissions are a lot more lenient than the Japanese one.
Take Jarrell Miller, for example. His ban from the sport is lifted. He's going to be boxing on Triller now after having tested positive 2 times.
After having tested positive on 2 separate occasions for more than just one banned substance.
You don't see any lifetime ban by way of the commissions here in the United States when it comes to Jarrell Miller, so don't accuse Naoya Inoue of foul play.
The Japanese Boxing Commission don't fuck around the same way the American ones do.
Don't accuse Naoya Inoue of foul play because he's a characteristically bigger puncher than you are.
Naoya Inoue himself said that the result would be the same no matter what gloves he wears.
To which Stephen Fulton replied, very soon, we will see. But will we? Last I checked, Naoya Inoue is a top-ranked fighter. At least in this part of the world he is. Whereas in this part of the world, Stephen Fulton, he's a PBC guy. Did something change?
Last I checked, Naoya Inoue is worth more money in Japan than Stephen Fulton is anywhere on the planet.
I've got nothing against Stephen Fulton. I like his energy. I like his run as a champion. I like what he's doing at super bantamweight. But I wasn't born yesterday, and I can't overlook the glaring political issues this potential fight faces when Naoya Inoue is a top-ranked fighter and Stephen Fulton is a PBC guy.
Are you gonna go to Japan for that fight? Because he's worth more money in Japan than you're worth anywhere on the planet.
Or are the people at the PBC prepared to make Naoya Inoue a substantial offer to bring him over to Stephen's side of things? What are you going to do?
What are you gonna do to make this fight happen? And what have you been doing to make the MJ Akhmadaliev fight happen? You know.
No, MJ, he's the only other champion in your division, the only other champion at your weight. I find it hard to believe that Stephen Fulton and Naoya Inoue are going to lock horns at any point in the near future when we seem pretty far away from Fulton versus Akhmadaliev, let alone Fulton versus Inoue. They're not even in the same division.
I want to believe Stephen Fulton.
I want to believe that he's serious about these fights. A potential Inoue fight, a potential undisputed MJ Akhmadaliev fight. I want to believe these things, but I don't see any movement on the ground to actually make any of this happen.
And until I do, I'm going to assume that this is much ado about nothing.
Just more of what we're used to from the guys over there at the PBC.